I had the extreme pleasure of being co-referee with Esse Baharmast in his first professional game. Preseason game, Kansas City at Wichita, MISL, and he was scared shit. He was so nervous that I had to take him for a walk before the game along the Wichita River, and you know, by maybe halftime he started to make some calls and he worked his well into it. But later he became one of the full-timers in MISL and refereed probably 1,000 of those games. Yes?
Yeah.
Okay, you can push up there. And then the esteemed coach of the Pittsburgh Spirit for so many championship seasons, John Kowalski, also a player at USC. Please come up. So, this is the way I like to do it.
Okay.
Oh, we have to see you speak now.
No. So, indoor soccer, how does it start? So, you all know the story about the NASL. They in the off season they wanted to play some indoors, and one of the times they brought over a team from Russia, and they played in the Spectrum in Philadelphia. And just so happened that in the audience that day was Ed Tepper, a real estate person from the Philadelphia area, who was friends of Earl Foreman, whose brother-in-law managed and owned the Spectrum, and Earl was very much involved with sports. So they said, this is a pretty good game, this game, indoors, NASL All-Stars, or Philadelphia against the Russians, and maybe we could do this as a league, okay? And they hired Walter Chisowitz, who lived in Philadelphia, who was the national team coach and director of coaching, to be a consultant. And Walter knew that to make this thing work, we were going to have to refine the rules and fix it and add time penalties and do stuff. We're going to have to get a soccer guy who also know a little bit about ice hockey, okay? And Walter and I were friendly. And I coached ice hockey for 3 years at New Haven and was a big hockey fan growing up in New York City. So I got to be the first referee-in-chief, director of operations of Major Indoor Soccer League, which meant that I got to referee the first game, which was Cincinnati Kids. You were assistant coach then. Pete Rose kicked out the first ball. It was in Nassau Coliseum. It was over 10,000 people. And I believe the Arrows won like 10-6 or something.
7-3.
7-3, whatever. So, thank you. So, all I remember is that it was 0-0 at the end of the first period.
At the beginning of the game.
Yeah, and the post games start that way. And like I'm nervous now. It's 0-0 at the end of the first period, and I'm saying, this is supposed to be high scoring. The fans are not going to like it, but it worked out. A bunch of goals were scored. So I wound up refereeing the first game in Philadelphia, the first All-Star game in St. Louis, the All-Star game in Madison Square Garden. I did about 200 games, but I was also doing the assignments. So that was easy for me to do. It was fantastic. And you talk about crowds, the St. Louis Steamers in their day, average over 18,000 plus, outdrew every NBA team, every NHL team in that given year. The sport, because we had the best available players in America, many NASL players crossing over, making extra money to play that game. We had the best players playing, and the game was compelling. It was really compelling. It was so challenging to referee. The first 2 years we did it only with one referee and another referee in the box that we called the alternate official. But that official had a whistle and could call fouls. And what happened was in the playoffs, the games became so contentious or competitive that in one particular game, the alternate official actually blew the whistle more than the referee on the field. And the commissioner came to me and said, we got to take that guy and take him out of the box and put him on the field, and that was the beginning of the two-referee system, which later became the way that the game became officiated. Essie, talk about your experience a little bit as a referee.
So I was a student at the University of Missouri in Columbia, and just loved the game. I would go to St. Louis to watch the games and go to Kansas City. So this was my back and forth. And when I broke my tibia and fibia, my professor said, hey, you know the game, become a referee, help us out. And that was my start. I started doing youth games. And when the MISL was there, I remember just driving to St. Louis to watch the games, hang out after the game. And the night that Joe was talking about, where the nexus of going from 1 to 2, bring in the other guy, the game was crazy. Everything just, all hell broke loose. And this was 2, 3 o'clock in the morning, and Denny's, they're sitting and they're talking, and they're trying to figure out how we're going to control this game. And they said, oh, we're going to put both guys on the floor and have another one on it. So I said, good, more opportunities for me then. So that's how it started. And I was doing indoor games, outdoor games, anything and anything. Having played the game, having a coaching license helped with all of the feeling for the match. And the first match we were together in Wichita, he's come over, and it was a good game. He enjoyed it. After we were done, he's like, okay, you know a few things about this game, and before you know it, it was indoor, few games, then more games, then a professional contract, and a professional contract until the league folded in '92. But I remember at one time when I was doing the game, I looked, Memphis Americans, San Diego Sockers, here's Bernd Holzenbein for Memphis, here's Kaz Dana for San Diego Sockers, 2 World Cup players, 2 fantastic players. And I'm like, it doesn't get any better than this. It was so easy because you had, when I went outdoor, indoor you had to make 10 decisions within a span of like 5 seconds. Is it a foul? Is it not a foul? Is it a time penalty? Is it not a time penalty? You're going to give advantage, not advantage. If it
Advantage being the real key, because the guy could lose the ball, go off the wall, gain it again, and now it's a play on.
So all of this, so when I went to the outdoor game, it was like, slow motion. Everything was in slow motion for me. So I could make a judgment just like that. It's much easier.
So good. So one of the things that was really special for me in terms of my development and learning about leagues was that the commissioner, Earl Foreman, he owned the ABA team, the Virginia Squires. He was a part owner of the Washington Redskins, and he knew sports. So he lived in Washington, and I lived in Connecticut, but the office was in Philadelphia. So they rented an apartment for both of us. So when I got the call, Earl's coming up from Washington, then I went down from Connecticut. And yeah, we worked all day in the office, but it was at night when we went to the apartment after dinner, and he had trouble sleeping. So 2, 3 o'clock in the morning, he would, he treated me like a son. And he's passed away recently, but he was a very, very, very special person in my life. So John coached assistant to Len Billis was the head coach at Cincinnati. John was his assistant. Then John became head coach of Hartford, Hellions, and then Pittsburgh Spirit, where you had the most success. Tell us a couple stories and how that translated into five-a-side.
Oh, wow.
Please.
So there's like 7 topics at the same
Yeah.
time. Okay, so anyhow, Lenny, welcome. Okay, original game coach for Cincinnati, okay, versus Dan Popovich and the New York Arrows, December 22nd, 1978. The reason I remember December 22nd because it was my birthday, okay, and I was about 7 years old. Okay, so it wasn't that long ago, but it kind of moved. So there was a need for different type of entertainment for indoor soccer. Lots of indoor soccer with different set of rules were being played in all over the country, from St. Louis to different places, New Jersey, Long Island, Connecticut, New York area, Boston, and outdoor game was being played, but of course in a weather like we usually have in the Northeast. Not this year. Okay, it was a bit difficult to play outdoor soccer, so play the indoor soccer. So again, play some of it with lines, and then Joe described the situation, how the Spartak Moscow came in to play against the Philly All-Stars or the MASL All-Stars, and actually the goals were about this high in that game.
Yeah.
And they were from
16 feet by 4, I think.
Almost, yeah, right. Okay, MISL decided not to have this, but more of a team handball. Okay, I think whatever 3 meters by 2 meters high. Okay, so about 3 yards, a little more than 3 yards, a little more than 2 yards, more than 6 feet.
Let me interrupt a second, John. Just about the rules. So we took the NASL rule book to start, which was about 6 pages. And the caveat was, if something happens in the game that's not in the rules, the outdoor rule applies. And there were so many things that happened indoors where the outdoor rule applied that we were writing rules as the season was going on, especially in regard to time penalties. So it was like every week a new bulletin was coming out. Change this rule, change that rule, do this, do that. Sorry, John.
No, that's good. So jump in anytime, because I was going to talk about that there were hardly any rules. Okay, but as the game was developing, different things happened in the game. So right over here in Baltimore, there was a famous player, very, very, very good player, Stan Stamenkovic.
Yeah.
Okay, but he was about my fitness. Okay, and but he was left-footed, and he was 250 pounds, and he was very good. When he stepped on the ball was more of an egg shape. Okay, but he couldn't take the ball away from him. Okay, but in transition, on the way back, okay, always they grab, okay, and then they walk back, so Stan can come back, and then transition, it could come back to play a little bit of defense, at least make it to the bench for substitutions. Substitutions were on the fly, and a la hockey. So anyhow, that's when the 5 or 6 fouls per quarter came in.
Actually, that's what happened. After about 4 or 5 years, the playoffs, like I said, became so hard, so that one of the owners was nervous about losing his star player every playoffs. So he said, we have to put this rule in, the 6 foul rule. And the 6 foul rule was that on the sixth foul created by the team, somebody has to serve a 2-minute time penalty. So that completely changed how the game was played. So games that used to be 10-8, 7-3, 8-5, now teams were afraid to take a foul in the attacking half, so they laid off. They played zone, and John's more of a coach than I was in this. And so we actually had an indoor soccer game in Pittsburgh, 0-0, overtime 1-0. And in my opinion, the 6 foul rule is what killed it as a spectator sport.
Yeah. And for me also as a referee, it really killed it. Because when they were sitting on 5, one team would say, take a dive, take a dive, take a dive to get the 6th one. And the other teams, don't touch him, don't touch him, don't touch him. So really there was no intensity. The intensity was gone.
Nick?
Yeah, I was wondering, did they have professional indoor soccer leagues in Europe or in South America, or were you guys the first guys to really start it?
I'm kind of getting to that point at this time.
In Brazil?
Okay. Yeah. So Arnie, then we went look for some players in Brazil. You were never in Brazil. We did summer soccer camps at Pelé soccer camps, but we never been to. But we had Pelé and we had a couple of other people. Okay, so in the Quadrillas, the red districts, we were there, looking at some players, and there were some interesting things, that happened, So, but we got a couple of players, and then and Arnie went down to Brazil with me for the first time. However, okay, when we were picking up the Brazilian players, okay, they were playing their own different version. Okay, they had 2 different versions. Football rapido, okay, behind the goals, okay, with dasher boards, okay, but the main game was futsal, okay, a little bit different version than the first and second World Cup for the indoor soccer, but the game was shaping up over here as an exciting game. In Pittsburgh, we were averaging over 10,000 people a game, very successful franchise. However, Pittsburgh itself, okay, went through a closing of the steel mills in mid-'80s, and coal mines, and there was another team called the Pittsburgh Penguins hockey team, okay, and they drafted Mario Lemieux for the first 2 years, and they were averaging solid 6,000 people a game. So they decided, okay, to close one of the teams, and the contract with ESPN, okay, came in for the NHL, the National Hockey League, because Gretzky at that time was playing in Edmonton, I believe. Islanders were dominating everything. Okay, so they got the contract, and the beginning of the end, when we were owned by a very famous owner, okay, DiBartolo, they're still on the 49ers, okay, and anyhow, they closed us down as a successful franchise just for the Penguins, you know, to make it. Okay, so, you know, but the game got very popular. In Cleveland, they were averaging, at some games, we always played in Richfield Arena in front of 19,000 people. There was some, you know, like you mentioned earlier, St. Louis, you know, terrific crowds. San Diego, they were selling out the, you know, small arena, but they were selling out all the time around 12,000 people. So different teams were averaging very, very well. The game got very popular, where FIFA took a little bit of a notice, okay, that, oh, this game has something in it, okay, that is, you know, let's put this whole thing kind of under one set of rules. So in 1986, FIFA organized first World Indoor Soccer informal championship. It wasn't a World Cup or anything like that. It was in Budapest. And basically was the outdoor rules, okay, transferred into playing five-a-side. So four players.
With boards or without?
Without.
Without
Okay.
boards.
Okay, so it was everybody, all the arenas, all the pavilions over there in Europe, whether in Spain or Portugal or a lot of other places, everybody plays team handball. Okay, so natural configurations already, they had that, you know, so the field is team handball. Okay, the penalty area with the arc, okay, which is 6 yards, natural. Okay, so all of that already was there. So that first game in November of '86, that was the beginning of the transition to a different style of playing, besides playing the American style with the dasher boards. And in Brazil, they were going very strong with futsal. Spain was going very strong with futsal. They all play different styles. So did Holland, so did Belgium, so did Portugal, so did Spain. England wasn't much interested. Germany wasn't much interested. Paraguay, Argentina, you know, they played the different versions of small-sided games. Indoor game could be played outdoor game. Okay, but none of the Brazilian football rapido that wasn't making playing behind the goal. So even in hockey, you know, you play behind the goal. Okay, in MISL, the goals were inside the dasher boards. Okay, so therefore made the game longer, good transition, speed, you know, was part of the game, and quality of players was unbelievable. Some of the MLS teams at the moment, if you take the era of players from that time to the era of players at this time over here, they would be a little bit short, okay, on the talent that we were able to provide, because there were some terrific internationals, national team players, Kazdena, okay, Holzenbein, where there was, you know, Stan Terlecki, you know, that we had, you know, there was some, you know, terrific, you know, so some of the different players. Okay, but that was the beginning of the transition, '86, and then in '89, FIFA organized the first World Championships for indoor soccer. Okay, now is more of a futsal, which is a little bit different style of playing.
And some of you on Twitter might have seen someone's posting almost daily the pictures and the results of that team that played in Holland, the first team that you took that won the bronze medal. And then I think yesterday or today was the anniversary of the semifinal we lost to Holland 2-1.
I don't know there was an anniversary.
Yeah, because you're not on Twitter. That's why you got to be on Twitter.
I'm on Facebook.
Yeah, well, it doesn't count. So let's have it. Did we raise any questions, or does someone like to ask a question before we turn it over to the next speaker? Sir.
Just, I see fantastic presentation, and
Thank
you. I see now that indoor soccer still continues, right? It still continues in Rochester and Harrisburg and here in Baltimore, whatever. What's the future for the indoor game now, being that the outdoor game has taken its place in America, where it, and is growing in leaps and bounds? Futsal was being promoted by FIFA, so obviously that is being promoted in different parts of the United States. Where does the indoor game today stand? Meaning that you don't hear much about it, you don't see much about it. The quality is different. The teams are smaller and not in the biggest markets.
Well, I think you've answered part of your own question. Obviously, in the height of MISL, the glory days, there was no outdoor soccer.
Yeah.
So now outdoor soccer has grabbed a hold again and has developed and is in great shape. SE refereed the first MLS game, the first MLS championship game. Your last game was the MLS All-Star game when you came home from the World Cup. So, and we all know where the league is today, so the outdoor soccer is so popular, getting all the players. The indoor soccer playing in smaller arenas, smaller cities, less pay, the quality of play is not as good. And I'll make a statement that the game that we knew was the game that we knew because of the quality of the players. When the quality of the players goes down, that game becomes less attractive. And so I don't want to say anything negative about any, but you understand what I'm saying. It becomes even less difficult to watch.
Well, there was one or two other things that changing of the rules. We actually had offside, passing the ball in the air over the red line, blue line, red line, or vice versa. Okay, so you had to keep the ball reasonably build it up. Okay, and you couldn't play really deep balls into the corner. And sometime later on, they changed the game completely, where goalkeepers were able to take the ball, or anybody, could have served the ball to the opposite corner. There was a big guy, posting up, and everybody played off the postman, and became basically a non-game, which is basically a long game, chase, a little bit like American style of players, send the ball down and press, a little bit like Canadian hockey, send the puck down, don't give it to
Dump it in, it's called dump it in.
Dump it in. Okay, dump it in and press.
Dump and chase.
Okay, anyhow, so the game, as a result of rule changes, that was supposed to be increased scoring, because and then they changed the 3-point goals from outside of the arc. Inside of the arc, this became 1 point, 2 points, 3 points, and confused all the soccer spectators. So they kind of branding themselves into arena soccer. Keith Tozer is looking and got a couple of owners from the NBA to do the futsal, on the professional level. So I guess there was some talks with the Lakers, there was some talks with Dallas, different people, but that is not really shaping up to be a professional. A great sport to play, a great sport to watch a little bit, futsal, kind of for American spectators. The indoor game, American style, I think was more exciting. At some segments when the rules will, play, with certain rules, that you actually have to play soccer, not just, dumping the ball, and, chasing the ball and, rely on physicality and individual speed, and that's what may be lacking, team effort, team way of playing. So the movement of the ball in relationship to the player on the ball and to the space available, basically in a build-up, situation. So the game was basically dump the ball, and press. So
Coach Phillips.
Well, first of all, I must say that none of the rules that you guys changed and came up with helped my teams. So I'm a little disappointed. But the other part of it is that your question is a really good one, but I think the game configuration or the board configuration, if that changed, the game would be better. So the parabola effect exists. Any ball that goes long goes to the goalkeeper, kills the attacking play. If you take out the round corners and you don't make it rectangular in the corner, but you put a diagonal board in, you'll gain 5% attacking space, and now you have 3 surfaces to play the ball off of. So most of the balls that go long and rebound off the back wall aren't going to be in the goalie's hands. They'll be back in play. So that's The only part that I looked at the game, I said, some of these games are pretty damn boring because you're watching every potential play,
Yeah,
whether
we
it's
know.
a dump or
Oh,
whether
we
just
know.
a soft pass that went a little bit too far,
Right.
ends up in the goalie's hands. So
You also coached Philadelphia too, right? You coached
I did.
Cincinnati, Philadelphia,
Cincinnati, Pittsburgh, and Philly.
Philadelphia.
Before John. John was my assistant in Pittsburgh and in Philly.
In Cincinnati.
I mean, in Cincinnati, yeah.
Any other questions?
Thank you.
Well, thank you, everyone. Thank you.